What's the number one thing I need to focus on in terms of which bucket I need to focus on? So do you need to focus on the sales, the marketing, the profit model? Do you need to focus on the product, which is the operations, the fulfillment? Do you need to work at the protection model, which is going to be your legal, your accounting, your insurance? And or maybe you need to work on the bonus bucket. Welcome to the Moms Makin Dough podcast. I'm your host, Kendra Hewitt. On today's episode, we're going to dive into a concept I call the buckets of your business. So, when I do a discovery call or a call with a potential customer client, I go through these buckets, and this is part of my questionnaire, my pre screening process for all of my incoming inquiries on whether it's coaching client, consulting client. They are different. And also, even just like working with someone with some of their money mindset stuff, I will ask very similar questions in terms of their buckets of their money. But today I'm going to focus on the buckets of your business because there are four different buckets if you own a business that not only do you need to know and become aware of, but you also need to start to master. And so today I'm going to walk you through the approach, the four different buckets, what they entail, and give you some homework on how you can start to not only apply this in whatever business you are in, but also if you are just start thinking about starting a business and or you're working currently on growing one. It is so critical because you think about all of the things you need to know when you actually are running a business, and it's actually, if you think about it beforehand, it's a little bit overwhelming, which is why starting a business and running and operating one is not for, I always say, the light of heart. There is so many, like I said, factors that play into running and building a successful business. So, I'm going to go over some of what my approach is and how I utilize these four buckets to not only grow or scale a business, but help you. A lot of times, I've been working a lot with a lot of clients lately that are just looking to pivot how they work, pivot how they maybe their business model, pivot some of the ways that they're delivering their business model or training their team, even with all of these new tools coming into our marketplace. AI is here to stay. We all know that. Originally, when AI came out and ChatGPT came out, I was like, man, that's cheating. But now I'm starting to embrace and learn to work with it because I realize if I don't work with it, it's going to outwork me. So let's look at the buckets of your business. So, bucket number one is going to be the advertising, marketing. Each bucket has four components that I'm going to talk about it. It's going to be advertising, marketing, sales, and your conversion. So I like to call this is our profit bucket, right? And this is also where we look at the chief marketing officer. So this is how are we marketing our product? How are we engaging with potential customers? What is that conversation? How are we asking for what I call first dates rather than, come stay over my house? Uh, we are asking for how are we asking for a sale? How are we delivering that sales process? What is our conversion rate? How do we measure the data and the success of our sales and marketing? How do we know what is working and how do we know what isn't working? So, this is when we look at the traditional bucket. This is, like I said, the bucket is like I think about it with profit overhead because this is what's going to drive revenue. You can have the best product in the world, but if you don't have a marketing and sales funnel that is driving and creating leads, then you are basically going to have a failure to launch, right? So I'm in this process right now where I'm starting to leverage my coaching and consulting, and I'm starting to really build a following, starting to market to people that are not just referred to me, but like colder organic leads. I'm not paying for advertising yet on that business, but on my other ones, I do pay for it. So I track those numbers very specifically because that's part of my conversion and what my cost per lead is, and all of these things, KPIs, key performance indicators that actually matter to those individual businesses. So, the reason that I talk about this bucket first is because what I find is that most people, when they come to me and they have a business problem, that business problem is usually some way or shape or involved in cash flow. And you cannot have consistent cash flow or cash flow at all without this first bucket operating. And that's going to bring me to the second bucket, which is going to be the second P, which is going to be product. And this is like, hey, you have to have a good product or service that you are offering to the market. And this is where we look under this category. In this bucket, we put things like operations, your fulfillment. So if you had sales, how do you fulfill that product? What are the systems? That's the next thing behind it. What are the systems behind your actual business model in general? Who are the people that are necessary? This is where hiring and firing is really in this bucket, is the people and the management of the actual sales process that's going to lead us to the product sales that is going to lead us to the profit. So, profit and product go hand in hand, right? This is your people that are deliver your customer service, that make sure your fulfillment is on time, the operational side of it. And this is typically in a traditional business model. This is where we look at the role being called the COO, Chief Operating Officer. So, this is the day to day grind. This is the day to day system so that things don't fall through the cracks. This is the thing that keeps the business churning on a consistent level. So that's our second bucket. Our third bucket is going to be our CFO role, and that is going to be a lot of people think of the CFO role as the profit, which it is not. Like I said, it doesn't drive profit. The CFO role is really about protection. And protection is the third P and the third bucket. And this is the bucket that most people hire out and most people outsource most quick because it is usually a very specific set of skills that are required to be able to utilize this bucket. So when we think about this bucket, we're looking at legal. We're looking at how your business is structured. We're looking at insurance. We are looking at HR policies and also like contracts, agreements. We're looking at your accounting, mostly your accounting, your and accounting. When I say accounting, that includes things like your accountant, it includes bookkeeping, it includes compliance. Um, and then it also includes tax strategy, right? Once you start really making that profit and you need to have some of this tax strategy in place to start to use to your advantage. So that's going to be your third bucket. And then that's going to bring us to our next bucket, which our next bucket is going to be the bonus bucket. I don't have a P for this. I wish if you come up with a P, let me know because I would love to have it because I love the alliteration of the P's. But this is where we look at your CEO. And I want to rift here a little bit on this because I think this is so critical and such a mindset shift that a lot of people, unless they've been in business for a while and or started to scale. And when I say start to scale, I mean you have more than yourself. You're not a self-employed business. You're not in sales. You have either an assistant or you've started to scale employees. The average company I work with has 5 to 10 employees. That's the size I really like to work with. I do have ones that have had more, but really looking at that the CEO role. And here's where how I like to define the CEO role. The four items that fall under this bucket are going to be growing, scaling, investing your profits, and then also just research and development. So planning for the future of like, hey, we want to own a business. I mean, we want to buy a building. We want to roll out this new product to the market. We want to add additional services to our offerings. And why I say this is the CEO because every single other bucket reports to this one category because we need all of those 3 other buckets. The profit bucket, the advertising, marketing, sales, and conversion processes. And then we need the product or the service that we offer with the operations, the fulfillment, the systems behind it, and most importantly, the people behind it. And then we need the protection bucket, which is our legal, our accounting, our insurance, and our HR. So we need all of those 3 buckets, the CFO in the legal, accounting, insurance, and HR. Then we have the CMO, the advertising, the marketing, the sales, and the conversion. And then we have the actual product bucket, which is the COO, which is our operations, our fulfillment, our systems, and our processes, right? And I want you to think about those buckets for a minute because the 3 people that work in those buckets are really very different people. They have very different skill sets and talents, and they also have very different, like, hiring and, like, structure behind them, right? So, for example, someone that loves routine and day-to-day operations is usually not found in the sales and marketing aspect of the CMO role, right? Because the sales and marketing person loves the thrill of the hunt. They love the promotion. They're usually extroverted. They're um people almost said people pleasers. They're not people pleasers. Well, sometimes they are. But they are people that love to be out there and connecting with others versus the operations person. They really like to be like working behind the scenes and they like daily routine data and details typically, right? Details and most sales and marketing people don't necessarily go hand in hand. And I speak from true experience as the person that loves the sales and marketing and not the operations. And they usually partner or work with people that are the opposite. For example, my husband and I are partnered in our practices together. He's a chiropractor. We used to have multiple locations. Now we're down to our main flagship location, which has been awesome. And with that said, he has really, when he first started, our division of labor was CMO, me being this chief marketing officer, and him being the COO, daily operations. Now, while he does maintain the daily operations as the lead practitioner in our practice, we have others that work for us as well. He also has stepped and taken a lot of the role of the CMO on. However, we still work together on a lot of the CMO stuff because that is much more my natural inclination. And what I want you to start to see by me portraying these buckets is that also you're going to start to realize where the buckets that you naturally fall into, and then the buckets that you need to build more support or leverage more if whatever your business is. Because there is nothing worse than a business owner who's stuck being the head bottle washer and the cook at the same time, right? So they are wearing too many hats. And when you first start your business, in most scenarios, even though you have, I find, even though you have an inclination towards one bucket, um, most of you, most every business owner I know and I work with, they start with a passion, number one. And then that passion, or what I like to refer to as purpose, kind of becomes a product. Not kind of, it does become a product or a service that they want to offer. But the missing link for most people is that most people that run a business or start a business, like sometimes it takes off without them and it starts running them instead of you running it. And, one of the things that really, hit us is that, like, we are about, I would say, 7 years of practice, and it really started to take a life of its own, where it started to dictate our life instead of us telling it how we wanted it to grow. And this is where the buckets became really, really pivotal for us to really start to focus on is, like, who are the people we need to actually hire for help, to help us do that, because at that point, like I said, when you're first starting, that first couple years in business, usually, if you make it that far, I think the statistics still are that grim where it's like the average business doesn't make it past year 5. Um, I think that it's even harder in this day and age because it's harder to have some types of businesses, but it's also there's been such a low barrier to entry with online, the growth of online businesses. And I think COVID just really threw the whole, remote working and working from home thing really just really shifted, which you're starting to see a shift back into the workplace now. But what you're starting to see too is like the real, like how much the market has shifted since the COVID. Um, and then that brings me to the next thing is, like I said, you're wearing all these hats as a business owner, and you're not necessarily stepping outside of your business and looking through the lens that I'm talking about right now. Like what buckets of and this is any business has these 4 buckets. No questions asked. It's just a question of how organized are these buckets and how are you utilizing them. So, with that said, the protection bucket, like I said, when I first started working with Ryan, he was the COO, I was the CMO. And then what ended up happening is when I had my baby Lily, she's 4 now. I really stepped and relinquished a lot of my CMO role, and Ryan stepped in. He was CEO, COO, CMO, and then he was starting to take on a lot of the CEO role. So that's a lot for a person to do. And then I retained the ownership of the CFO because that was what not only I had started to get very passionate about, but also is what I started to really have systems and processes behind that I could manage from home in a systematic fashion. And it, like I said, it became very, it was not how I was trained. It was not my natural skill set, but I started to really learn a lot about what it would take from a financial perspective. And I still manage that role in our practice today, but I've let go, like I said, of a lot of my CMO. And then we really work together as the CEOs. Like I said, he's still in the day to day operations, but as you can tell is that, like, if this is a sole business owner and wearing all of these you filling all of these buckets as one person is a lot to be expected. And there are people that do that. I always say that if you don't have the division of these buckets, where they are very organized, then it is only a matter of time before one of the wheels falls off the bus. And that brings me kind of to my homework for you guys today is that now that you know the buckets, what I want you to start to think about is like, what bucket do you need to focus on in your business? And it doesn't matter if your business was started yesterday, because if your business started yesterday, then I can tell you what bucket you need to be in. You need to be in advertising, sales, and marketing bucket while you're starting to roll out what that product or service it is in the fulfillment side of it. So it's a delicate balance of knowing like what bucket to put your time, energy, and money into, and which ones really, like I said, need your focus at this stage of the game. For me, another way I like to think about buckets is I think about it as like 4 burners on a stove. And here's the thing, you can have all of the burners on at once, but you can't have all of the burners on full throttle every time, or else one of them is going to burn to the ground. So, I find that you're constantly balancing the temperature of the burners that you have, the CMO, the COO, the CFO, and the CEO roles. And one of the things that I assign a lot of my new clients with is that I will have them look and assess their buckets and rate themselves on a scale of 1 to 10 of the buckets you have, which one is a 10, which if you're coming to see me, most likely none of them are a 10. And that's our goal is that to start to move you towards that 10, maybe not get you to that 10. That's always a work in progress, right? But maybe we're going to really start to refine how that's going to happen for you. And that's where, but we're going to pick a singular focus because here's the thing, like I said, you can't have all of these burners running on full tilt without running out of gas and or burning something to the ground or as like I like to do often, burning it to the pan. I'm one of those people that like I'll put eggs on and then I literally will walk away. My ADHD kicks in and then I'm doing something else and I realize that the smoke detector is going off. And so you don't want that to happen in your business where you're burning eggs to the pan and then you need a new pan every couple months, like I often do. So I just want you to think about is like as a business owner, which bucket needs the most TLC right now for you. And then I want you to ask yourself two more follow-up questions that I will ask to start to engage a client. And a lot of this information, like I said, I collect before at a discovery call. And this is why I thought it was such a good episode today to possibly talk about this, is because a lot of times what I find is when I ask these questions, the business owner knows which one is, at risk of burning down to the ground. They know, hey, I'm not getting enough leads in. My focus needs to be on the CMO and the marketing, the sales. They know, hey, shit, something's broken with my systems and I need to hire a new person here and I need to fire the person that's currently there. Um, or else I'm going to have a fire in my operations or my fulfillment section of my business in the COO role. And perhaps there's a legal problem. Maybe there's legalities involved. Maybe you're in the wrong entity type. Maybe you are just got your first. I have a client right now. She just got her first $100,000 tax bill that she didn't plan for. And you can imagine the massive growth that happened in her company. But the problem, the fire for her was that she did not have any accounting or tax strategy person in place to help her avoid and or plan for having that growth of revenue in the previous year, right? Because we're just filing taxes for 2024 in 2025. So now she can make some appropriate changes for 2025, which is what her and I are focusing on. So our focus for her bucket is looking at the CFO and hiring, like, who's the person we need to hire and have her help her start to strategize what she needs to do. So next year as she continues to grow, she doesn't owe $100,000 to the IRS by the end of it, because that's not fun. What's one of the biggest problems I see with a lot of my business owners, specifically in this protection category, is that I have a lot of business owners. This is extremely common. And the reason I know it's extremely common is I lived here for freaking years where, our taxes would come due and we would be using this year's revenue to pay last year's tax bill. And I see it all the time. It breaks my heart, but at the same time, I always know it's happening for someone, not to someone, because they made money and now they just need to learn the tools and hire the right people to help them work that CFO role. They don't need to necessarily learn all the tools and the tricks and the tax code to be able to do so. They just need to know, like, hey, how do I hire someone that helps me do that? She's been coming up on my mind lately because, like I said, no one wants to hit direct deposit 100 grand to the IRS. And even on a good day, that's not fun. And so just like thinking about it is like, well, I want you to ask yourself that question first, is like, what's the number one thing I need to focus on in terms of which bucket I need to focus on? So do you need to focus on the sales, the marketing, the profit model? Do you need to focus on the product, which is the operations, the fulfillment? Do you need to work at the protection model, which is going to be your legal, your accounting, your insurance? And or maybe you need to work on the bonus bucket. I'm in the place right now where in one of my businesses, we need to work on the bonus bucket. And the bonus bucket is, what do we do next? How do we invest some of our profits? How do we grow from where we're at? Because we've been stagnant for a little while. What's our next step to scale? And also, too, maybe what some additional services or packages we should be offering that would allow us to bump up our CMO bucket, our marketing, sales, advertising, and conversion, to then also, like, what kind of people do we need to do that on our product side? And the service side is like, do we need to hire a new role or do we need to eliminate one we currently have? These are the types of questions we ask, but we hone in and we look at what we call the domino. And the domino is which bucket, if I started to work on, would ultimately affect all the other buckets, right? And cascade, what we call cascade across our business. So That is the number one question I want you to ask. The number two question I want you to ask yourself is, which bucket do you need to expand in, right? So this is when we're looking at the concept of addition. I love to teach when it comes to business is that like business, you need addition and subtraction, and usually you need them simultaneously, right? Is like, what do I need to start doing in my business? And what do I need to stop doing in our business? Sometimes asking it differently on how you filter that question really gives you some different answers. And I like to say questions are always the answer. That's what coaching does, is that we just get really good at asking very strategic questions so you come to your own conclusions and your own answers. So, what do you need to expand on? Maybe it's your knowledge. Maybe it's just like I said, the client that I was working with the $100,000 tax bill. She needs to expand her knowledge of, hey, what type of tax strategy could I be doing? And most of all, she doesn't even need to expand her knowledge of the tax code. She needs to expand her knowledge on the type of person she would hire and who she would interview and engage to do that for her because she's at that level of revenue where she can afford to do that. And then maybe it is your actual, like, efforts. Maybe it's you need to expand your energy and you need to put more energy into your marketing and less energy into the operations. Maybe that's not your skill set. Maybe your skill set is the marketing and not your operations, but you've been sucked into the operations. And I find that most business owners, when I ask these 2 questions specifically, they know right away. They need know right away where they need to focus. They don't need to do 6 months of coaching with me. They know right the heart of it. Now, while most of them will start to coach and work with me, the reason is that because now once we have a singular focus, we know what are the steps we need to take and what direction we need to go to start to bring that to reality, whatever it is that long term goal is. And then maybe it is your time. Like maybe you need to expand your time, like I said, in a different category. Maybe it's you need to do things like you need to do an insurance audit and be like, hey, what is all the types of insurance I have for my business? Now that I've grown, is it enough? Maybe it's something in the protection mode like that. Maybe you need to outsource an HR team because you're doing it all yourself. I'm in that process right now where we're a small team, less than 10 people, but at the same time, as like that that takes up a shit ton of time that I'm not really qualified to do. It just has happened to fall on my plate by default, so I have had to handle it. So I'm starting to look at it like, hey, what are my options to help outsource some HR and make it way more cohesive than I've made it, and really make it something that gives me peace of mind that I know it's handled correctly, and in a timely fashion that sometimes I don't have the capacity to do. So the next final question, again, back to the addition and subtraction model is what's an area of your business that you maybe need to contract? Now, I end on this, but I don't love to end on the contraction question because anytime I hear the word contract, even myself, I'm like, ugh, right? It's like it feels stagnant, it feels stuck. But there are times when you do need to, instead of contract, maybe the word is pull back. And again, same scenarios. Maybe it's you need to pull back on your involvement. Maybe you're micromanaging one of your team members that just doesn't need to be micromanaged. Maybe you are, and you need to pull back there. Maybe you need to pull back your hours. Maybe you need to and trust that the people that you've hired, that you're trained, are going to step in. Are they going to make mistakes at times? Sure, but it's going to become a training and leadership lesson for you to be able to do that if you pull yourself out of the business more. Maybe you need to pull yourself out so you could see the systems that you do not have in place. Like, I always say vacation is always such a really great test of how systemized your business is, right? Because if you leave for business, especially if you're scaled somewhat and you have a staff working while you are away, it gets very obvious of the things that don't have systems. Usually it's not, hopefully, while you're on vacation, but when you come back, when things are missed or stats aren't recorded or calls were missed or things like that that you start to realize, hey, shit, this system isn't working. Or maybe I don't have a system for this and I need to implement it. So that's a good example of like pulling back and contracting or subtracting instead of feeling like it's coming from a place of scarcity. So, I really want you to hone in on looking at these four business buckets. So, we have the CFO, which is your legal, accounting, insurance, and HR. Then we have the CMO, which is your sales, marketing, advertising, and conversion and leads to profit, right? And then we have your product, right? The product is going to be your operations, your fulfillment, your systems, and your people, right? The most important part of a lot of our businesses, right, is the people that are actually helping fulfill and create the customer service experience of the delivery of your product of service. And then our final bucket's going to be our CEO one. This is going to be your bonus bucket, but it's the one that's overall the I like to kind of visualize it as the umbrella over your business. And this is where you're looking at like growing revenue, scaling yourself out of the business, investing your profits, and also researching and development, right? So researching and developing new products, new avenues, new partnerships, new affiliates. This is really this is the fun part, like the CEO is the fun part, but remembering that all of these individual buckets report to the CEO. And I like to say, obviously, the CEO stands for the Chief Executive Officer, but I really like to think as the CEO is the Chief Energy Officer because they are driving the energy of the business. And the chief energy officer, their goal is to really do two things. And I think this gets lost a lot especially in like the verbiage of the CEO is, the chief executive officer is really the decision maker, right? It's usually typically the owner or someone that works right hand in hand with the owner of the company. If you're at a level where you can hire a CEO, and have them run your day to day. But they're not running your day to day operations because the COO is. They're running the COO, the CFO, and the CMO all together are reporting to the CEO. And I also say not only is the chief executive officer responsible for the decisions, but it's also the person that's really ultimately driving the direction of the company and also creating the cultural values of the company. So those are really big, big roles for someone to fulfill. And as you can see, managing a business is not for freaking sissies, right? There is so many components that need to be managed and refined and constantly evaluated for you to be in a growth trajectory instead of a sustain and or maintain or worse shrink. So, you are always looking at part of this of you understanding the business buckets is really being able for you to focus in on what is the bucket that needs the most TLC from you as the creator and founder of it. And also, again, those three questions just in closing is what do you need to do right now to focus on the bucket that needs the most help? And sometimes it might be a shift back to what you just comes naturally to you. And then the second question is going to be what do you need to expand? Like, where do you need to expand your time, your energy, your focus, your money, and or your knowledge? And then what do you where is an area of your business that maybe you need to pull back a little bit? We're going to use pull back instead of contract because I like that better. So I just want you to really dive in and give yourself this exercise, whether you're driving, whether you're walking your dog, these are all things, knowing these buckets that you can ask yourself. And here's the thing you're going to have an immediate response, an immediate answer. And my goal is you took in this information and you not only share it with someone that you think could benefit from it, but you apply it to your life by taking some sort of action in whatever bucket you need to focus on the most. And I hope that this you found this helpful. And I please ask you is, like I said, not only share it, but if you are enjoying and digging some of these business episodes, please, please, please like this episode and rate, review, and subscribe because that's how Moms Making Dough is growing. And I am loving doing this show. And I just would love if you could also help me grow too. Thanks so much. And we'll see you on Moms Making Dough on the next episode.